Thank you, Mr Speaker, and on indulgence I wish to update the House on the storms which have wreaked havoc on regional Victoria over the past week. The storms have turned roads into rivers, paddocks into lakes and plunging entire communities into darkness. And sadly, so very tragically, 2 lives have been lost. A man in his 60s lost his life in floodwaters in Woodside, eastern Victoria, on Thursday. And on Friday, a woman, just in her 20s, was lost at Glenfine in the state's southwest. She was driving to work. She never arrived. We extend to the families, the loved ones and friends our deepest sympathies. The storms and resulting flooding have upended so many communities, so many lives, during a time when many might be asking, how much more do we have to face? To all affected today, know that we face what is ahead together, as Australians always do. The damage has particularly hit the electorates of Gippsland, Monash, and I know your electorate of Casey too, Mr Speaker, and I recognise the efforts made by members to assist residents of these communities and others, indeed, where they indeed have been affected. Members on the other side, I see the member for Ballarat as well, all of those electorates, all of those communities, all of those regions. In total, 37 local government areas have been affected, and I acknowledge the work of the various members of parliament, electorate officers supporting their local communities, but indeed acknowledge the first responders. And as the situation remains serious, as the state braces for further bad weather later this week, we are with them all the way. I wish to update the House on the situation on the ground today, Mr Speaker, as at 9:30 this morning, 17,506 Victorian households were still without power. 129 Telstra network sites and 16 Optus sites remain down. And 11 communities have faced isolation: Athlone, Binge and Warri, Boolarra, Carrajong, Devon North, Poowong North, Streslecki, Willing South, Callista and Sherbrooke. And we understand that these communities are still unable to contact 000 emergency services. I can also report that Energy Australia's Yallourn Power Station has been evacuated due to a crack in the mine wall and the high water levels of the Morwell River. With such extensive damage to networks, a timeline for full power restoration is currently unknown. The Victorian SES has received more than 9,000 requests for assistance since the beginning of these storms last week, most of those related to downed trees, building damage, flood and rescue. The SES has been doing tremendous work, as they always do, answering these calls. Miranda Highway remains closed between Narberthong and Healesville. The Mountain Highway is also closed. I can also report that the response efforts around Victoria have scaled up and are progressing well. Recovery efforts are underway. The focus now is on clearing and stabilising roads and bridges to make them safe. Offers of assistance have been made and the Australian Government stands ready to assist if need be. Emergency services and Victorians are also bracing for what may well be ahead. A moderate flood warning remains in place for the Latrobe River. High levels of the river remain steady across impacted areas and are receding, thankfully. But there is a possibility of 20 to 30 millimetres of rainfall over impacted areas during the week. Southern Rural Water has advised that Lake Glenmaggie is expected to spill in coming days. Through inflows to that system are continuing to reduce, thankfully. The Australian Government is providing support as needed. I can report that Categories A and B of the joint federal-state disaster recovery funding arrangements have been activated. This is for all of the 37 local government areas in central and eastern Victoria impacted by these floods and storms. Available assistance measures include personal hardship and distress, personal and financial counselling, counter-disaster operations, removal of debris from residential properties, as well as the restoration of damaged essential public assets. Mr Speaker, we will respond to further requests for assistance as necessary. At this difficult time, I again wish to acknowledge the extraordinary efforts, the remarkable endeavours of our volunteers and emergency services. They undertake their roles in very, very difficult and dangerous circumstances. They do it completely without fanfare. I also want to pay tribute to Victorians who have responded within their own communities with bravery, with selflessness, an overwhelming sense of community. The farmer at Wanron in South Gippsland who began milking his neighbour's cows to help out where he could. The cafe proprietors at Yarram who have been offering free hot meals and device recharging for those without power. The man who saved a bus driver being swept away in Traralgon. He said, "I was pretty physically buggered, Oh well, it's what you do, isn't it? Such an Australian thing to say. Such bravery. The Gippsland Rangers Roller Derby Club, who had their premises and equipment totally destroyed by floods but have been strengthened by the community rallying around them. There were lots more tears today, but we got through this, one of them said. The resilience of Australians in crisis can only be summed up by one word: humbling. And for Victorians who are again dealing with dual crises, it is even more so. The situation far from over, with the next low-pressure system expected later in the week. Emergency services are working to ensure people remain safe. And with any flood, as we saw earlier this year across New South Wales, we know that disaster is not over when the rain stops or the water recedes. There will be many difficult days and weeks and months ahead as communities take the first steps to rebuild and recover. That path out will be unimaginably difficult for the loved ones of the two Australians whose lives have been lost. The thoughts of all Australians are with them today, as are, I know, the thoughts of the Prime Minister. I will endeavour to keep the House updated as the situation in Victoria continues to evolve. Thank you, Mr Speaker.